Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome. I'm Terry Wisdom, and this is Harlem Network News, and I'm co-hosting for WBAI, What's Going On? And we have been doing a series on gun violence, and we are very, very honored to have with us our Manhattan District Attorney, Alvin Bragg, who has made the time to talk to us because it's a very, very critical issue. So, DA Bragg, if you would just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, whose you are, and let us know a bit about the role that your office plays in gun violence and the mitigation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me on, Terry. It's always good to be in conversation with you. Guns, shootings are a top priority for the office. As some of your listeners may already know from our prior discussions, I grew up in Central Harlem during the 80s. No stranger to gun violence. Had a semi-automatic weapon pressed to my head when I was a teenager, and had other incidents involving guns. And so it's a sober issue. It's as pressing today as ever, and it's been our real focus. And I'm happy to report that in Manhattan, shootings are down 66%, down to pre-COVID levels, and homicides are down 48%. And that's been the byproduct of a lot of hard work between my office, the NYPD, and our community partners, focusing on those who are driving gun violence, holding them accountable, and at the same time strategically investing in our communities so that there are other opportunities, and the people who may be the next up, so to speak, to fill in the vacuum of the people we hold accountable are not brought into that, not steered into that. And so really is a tremendous collaboration between community partners, the NYPD, and a 66% decline. Obviously, any shooting is not what we want, but that decline we find to be very, very encouraging.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And if you could just share a little bit, we're focused on gun violence, and folks understand that you are the district attorney for Manhattan, but just a little clarity in terms of what the district attorney actually does and is responsible for, and how you dive into the gun violence situation, just so that people are clear.
Sure. So I can give a few examples on enforcement, and then also some of the community engagement. So we are working, with the police department, and oftentimes doing long-term investigations, looking at a neighborhood, looking at a group that may need to be disrupted and held accountable. An example, within Harlem, East Harlem specifically,
Okay.
significant violence. A few years ago, we focused on it because it was one of the most violent by number of shootings in the entire city, and we partnered with NYPD. We said, look, we're gonna staff every time a shot is fired in this neighborhood like it's a homicide.
Okay.
And that dedicated resources, the working hand in hand. Sometimes people think that the district attorney's office is only involved after an incident. That's true. Sometimes there's, if something happens, an assault or a shooting that's not part of something we're already investigating, we'll obviously get involved in. But what we also do is long-term investigations where we know there's a specific group of people that are driving harm, or a specific area that needs additional attention. So we did that. We partner with NYPD on our side and on their side, resources equivalent to a homicide for all the shots fired. We brought about 10 prosecutions of people who were driving violence. At the same time, we engage with our community partners, with people who serve East Harlem, particularly those who are working with youth. And it was important to do those at the same time, but we're holding folks accountable who've been involved. Some of this, broad daylight shootings, really endangering people in the community, but at the same time wanted to invest. And so those who were sort of adjacent to or just happen to be out in these neighborhoods where something's happening, give them other engagement. So it's both. It's both those kind of doing those investigations, and then when we go into court, we are, adjudicating those cases, taking them to trial if need be, or maybe a plea, and then at the same time also doing the community engagement. And that the result of that effort was that neighborhood went 8 months without a single shooting, and it was the area that had
Wow.
the most.
Okay. Well,
We
thank
also
you.
do in terms of strategic. We're really looking at retribution. When there's a shooting on a Monday, as a posting on social media,
Mhm.
engaging with community partners to say, what's happening here, and then on our end, dedicating resources to do, a thorough, timely investigation to hold people accountable so they know that the initial act and any retribution, there will be accountability for them.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And it's very critical because it really takes full circle to address this. Now, one of the things that you mentioned is that the shootings and the crime are down, and any shooting is too many shootings, any killing is too many. But when we say that the shootings are down, is that for all of Manhattan? Because as you mentioned, there are certain hot spots. It might be East Harlem, some areas of Central Harlem, other areas, which I don't know all the areas, but is it down overall, or are certain areas remaining constant and need more attention?
So why don't we start with sort of the broadest lens for the city? The city decline in shootings is 55%. In Manhattan, it's 66%, so down even further in Manhattan. And because
Mhm.
of our docket, it's helping to drive that citywide decline. In terms of homicides, citywide, 36% decline. In Manhattan, 48%. So again, a steeper decline here,
Okay.
and helping to drive that citywide decline. And then in terms of neighborhoods, because this is a great question. It's a question that I track this as
Okay.
shootings are concentrated in particular neighborhoods historically. So, is it that the neighborhoods that don't traditionally have shootings, is all the decline there? And I can report that's not the case.
Mm.
I was in Harlem yesterday meeting with a number of clergy, going over with them a bunch of crime stats, including these crime numbers. And I was happy to report to them, as I'm reporting to you, that, the areas that have had the chronic historic gun violence are seeing decreases as well. And so that to me is a lifelong resident of two of the precincts that have
Yes.
experienced the most gun violence historically. Encouraging to see that this decline is one that the experience is we're getting the benefit of that decline in neighborhoods that have really kind of borne the brunt of it, historically.
Okay, well, that's great because we know there are a lot of factors that go into it. A lot of black and brown communities, and really, it's not so much based on race, but it's based on economics, disparity, education, housing problems. So we're dealing with all of that. But I just wanted clarification because, as you know, on the news every day, we're hearing, there was a shooting here, there was a shooting there. So when we hear it's down, we just need clarification and
No,
confirmation.
it is, as I said, it's a question that I ask often, and I'm sort of engaged with my staff on, and it's important. The places that have historically had the most shootings, and we focus there. Like I told the resources in East Harlem. We've also been working in the 32nd precinct, which is Central Harlem, 32nd precinct, 135th Street. Late last year, I'm sorry, earlier this year in Washington Heights, we did an action where we held accountable, or we brought indictments which were seeking accountability.
Okay.
A group that was responsible for 50% of the shootings
Wow.
in Washington
Wow.
Heights during the relevant
Wow.
time period.
Wow.
So
Wow.
our focus is to really focus on where the challenges are most acute, and really try to, at the same time, hold those accountable who are doing wrong, but then also invest in those communities as well.
Right. To stop others from going in the wrong direction. And just briefly, because we're going to get on to our next question, but what about the housing projects? Because it appears that some of the issues and crimes and things come out of that. And I only say that from being on the streets and hearing young men and people talking about not going from one project to the other or afraid to come out their building because this is happening, that's happening. Is that a target area or a situation, or is this just not really the case?
The example I gave earlier about East Harlem was, to be more specific, Johnson and Jefferson, and rivalries between those two housing developments. And so we definitely see that. We see different groups associated with different developments, different allegiances. It's not just NYCHA buildings; it can also be other neighborhoods. But
Right.
that's certainly something we see. It's sort of a tale as old as time, or certainly as old as the 50 years plus that I've been in Harlem, that my block versus your block, or my development versus your development. And so we certainly see that. And I would add that social media has added a new dimension. It
Absolutely.
was back in the day, you won fewer guns, and so the altercation more likely to be a fist fight, and then everyone would come back another day, and you could go back to your block and say, you won, and the person go back to their block and say they won. Now far too often, sadly, there's a gun involved, and then there's a social media post that adds fuel to the fire, and that's when we talk about trying to disrupt the retaliation and the retribution. We've seen these cycles, in one of the actions I mentioned earlier, the Washington Heights one. It dated back. It was groups going back and forth at each other. So social media is certainly, obviously has some positive uses. I'm not trying to say,
Right.
except
Yes.
though, go back to the time when we didn't have digital, watches and things like that. But it is real the way it's being used to sort of really intensify some of these rivalries, and is the cause of things that people post of additional violence. So being mindful of that, having community partners on the ground who can intervene, disrupt, de-escalate, and then of course holding people accountable when they engage in violence.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing. This is really important, and especially coming from your office because you're covering a lot of the circle. Question: what are you doing? What is your office doing to address the 3D printed guns? Because that's a whole nother new element that a lot of people are really not familiar with, even how that happens.
Yeah. So, for those who may not know, let me just talk about first what those kinds of guns are. So, traditional guns, manufactured, in a factory, that's the what we think about, Smith and Wesson, something like that. Uh, Several years ago, we started to see guns that you could sort of assemble the parts that would be mailed in. We had some laws that were passed in New York that addressed that and made shipping those parts in illegal. Now, you can, right from your kitchen table with a 3D printer, print out a gun, using plastic filament.
Wow. Wow.
For us in law enforcement, um, there's no serial number, so that makes it almost impossible to track. You can't go back to the last lawful sale. Just in my time in office, the expense associated with this, the sort of the ability to do this, the cost has dropped, and so you've got lower cost, convenience, And then with some groups, particularly young groups, it's a, you can print a gun out in Lego colors. You can put an insignia
Wow.
on it.
Okay.
So this has been something that we've been monitoring closely along with the NYPD, and we're seeing more and more. And so we've been doing a number of things. One, prosecuting. Two, working with the legislature. We have a bill. While it is illegal to possess a ghost gun,
Mhm.
it is not illegal. It's no law in the books saying you can't manufacture them. So if you print out
Right.
100 guns, we're going to end up prosecuting you with possession, not with manufacturing. So that bill is something we hope will pass in Albany when they come back in session in January. And then we've also been engaging directly with industry,
Okay.
trying to say how can we have fewer of these guns. So for example, we met with people we had cases against and said, hey, how did you get that? How did you know to do this, particularly younger people?
Mhm.
And what we heard again and again was, while I was playing or watching, I should say, a
Mhm.
video game on YouTube.
Wow.
If you're familiar with Call of Duty, or maybe your listeners are, these gun-based video games, they're watching them, and then you click and you click, and the algorithm was driving people, our youth, to how to build and make a 3D gun. And so we engaged with YouTube. We reached out to them. We said, look, your platform is making Manhattan less safe. You can help us with safety. And so they put in some age restrictions. They also have user protocols in, saying now you can't have show the building of a 3D gun on YouTube. So we'll be vigilant in monitoring that and make sure that they're meeting that, honoring their commitment on that. We've also engaged with a 3D kind of printer cloud company. The way
Mhm.
you generate, the way you tell your printer to print a 3D gun is based upon, sketches and designs that have got to be loaded in. Some instances, coming from a cloud device. And we engaged with one of the companies that we were seeing their program in our cases, and we said, you're making Manhattan less safe. And to their credit, they said, okay, we don't do that. We're a 3D printer. We don't. This is not. We're not in the gun industry. We're not looking to do
Mhm.
this.
Wow.
And using kind of search terms provided by my office and by NYPD, using AI now to instruct the platform not to print sketches of guns. And so we're imploring other companies like that to follow suit. And so it takes sort of all of the above, Terry. We obviously
Right.
have to bring the cases and hold people accountable who are using 3D guns. And I should say parenthetically, if the operability is the same, the lethality is the same. If someone gets shot, they're not going to know the difference whether it was a ghost gun or a traditional gun. They are guns. I think sometimes the label ghost gun
Right.
sounds a little light to people. So
Right.
we're doing the enforcement. We have proposed legislation, and then we're engaging with industry to really address this scourge.
Wow. Okay. Well, this is certainly a wealth of information because people hear the term ghost gun, but they don't understand it. And just quickly, the people that are making these guns, are they like teenagers, youth, you know, I guess video game experts? Like, should you watch your kids and see, what is it?
So so I would say all of the above. We are certainly seeing adults
Mm.
who are making ghost guns, but what is a particular concern is the youth who, you print a ghost gun and, their favorite color, add an insignia, that think that this is, quote unquote, cool.
Right.
So it's all a concern, but I'd say a particular concern is access by our youth. But we it's not limited to our youth.
Right. Yeah.
We're seeing adults use them, and in a number of cases. So it is a problem for all age.
Across the board, and possibly adults getting those guns to youth. So we've got a lot of issues. But moving on, I understand that you were recently announced as co-chair of Prosecutors Against Gun Violence, along with someone from Columbus City, attorney Zach Klein. Can you tell us what this is and how it impacts? What is your role as the co-chair?
So I'm honored by this appointment.
And we're proud.
Prosecutors Against Gun Violence is a national, bipartisan, independent group of prosecutors focused on gun violence and committed to strategizing together, leveraging our different experiences to fight gun violence. And one thing underpinning it is that guns are traveling, right? And so a gun in one state may end up being used here, and so we need to coordinate in terms of our thinking on enforcement. We should be coordinating, thinking about legislative ideas. Some of the ideas I just talked about, things that we're doing on ghost guns, certainly things that could be done, elsewhere. But we're so affected by each other's jurisdictions on this. It makes sense to partner. So I follow in the footsteps of DA from Bronx, my dear friend Darcel Clark,
Okay.
who I'm succeeding in this role, and joined, and you said his name, as co-chair, Columbus City Attorney Zach Klein, and we will convene, and I've been to the conferences in the past, just so rich with ideas to share from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. We'll coordinate on litigation, putting in kind of friend of the court briefs on important gun cases before, for example, the Supreme Court. That's the type of work that the Prosecutors Against Gun Violence has done, and I'm looking forward to continuing that and to working with my colleagues across the country, because more than maybe any other issue, what happens in another state on guns affects us, right? We don't make guns here in New York, not the traditional kind, and so this level of coordination is something that is so important.
Yeah, nationwide. We're going to move because I know we're almost out of time, but if you could just say something, because it appears that a lot of the crimes that are being committed are by young or boys, male. What are we doing to arrest this problem? And combined, should these young boys who are committing these crimes be tried as adults? And that's a loaded question. So,
well, this is something that we think about a lot, and it's one of the reasons I spend so much time with our community groups that are engaging directly with our youth. Since I've been in office, we've been doing a summer program with groups throughout the borough, but certainly including those in Harlem. I know Aisha Sekou, I believe, has another show on this network, and
yes,
funding.
Yes.
But really to engage with groups that are working directly with youth and providing summer funding when we know it's a time when gun violence spikes. It's so important. It's part of the kind of strategic community investments we're talking about, and some of the things that they've done. With one group that's done mural with anti-gun violence themes. Another was in the studio doing hip hop lyrics, anti-gun violence themes, and so really engaging youth in particular during the summer months, and also providing funding to them. We know that makes a difference. Asking them to engage in meaningful things that benefit the community, and providing stipends to do that. A very, very sobering statistic, particularly for me as someone who's kind of seen this from all angles, is that 95% of shooting victims in New York City are Black and Latino, most of them men and boys.
Yeah,
And so it is a sobering statistic, and for anyone like myself who's looked into the eyes of a loved one who's witnessed a shooting and seen that blank stare, is critical. And so we're going to continue to do that kind of engagement work, side by side and simultaneous with our enforcement work.
Right. Yes. Great segue, because I've witnessed it, not firsthand. I didn't see it, but as you know, my son Ali Wisdom was shot and killed on the Shinnecock Reservation 4 years ago. Still a cold case. I'm a member of Harlem Mothers and Fathers Save. I know that you've been doing some work for the victims, the families. If you could just briefly share a little bit.
And I'm so deeply sorry about the loss of your son. And I
Thank
remember
you.
we first, talked about this, and I've joined. And for folks who don't know, or your listeners, I mean, Harlem Mothers and Fathers Save is it's a group. I felt just humbled to be in your presence, and there with other members of my team, counselors and advocates, just to listen and to learn.
Yeah, they come all the time. It's amazing.
It is for people who haven't been there, it's hard to capture the sort of the power in the room, the collective experience of mothers and fathers who've lost children to gun violence. And from my perspective, one of the most important things the office does is our Survivor Services Bureau, providing counseling and support. And something I want your listeners to know is those services are available free of charge and without regard to whether there's an active case. So someone can come to the office and say, you know what, I don't have a case going right now. I don't want to testify. I don't want to, but what I do want is I want services. Or we have other instances where there's been a prosecution, someone's been held accountable, and it's years after the fact, and someone who was a victim is getting services. And so that's something we've really focused on here. Our
Thank
crisis.
you. Very important, very important. And even you focusing on some of the cold cases is very important too, because a lot of the cases, majority, at least here in Harlem, are Black and brown people, and a lot of the cases are cold. Could be 20 years. So we've got to look at that. But thank you so much. This has been great information. If you would just share with us some of the things, just briefly as a closing, things that you've done, things that you're looking to do in the future, what the focus is, what the priorities are, and what some of the challenges have been. And that's a long question, but just highlight some of the challenges and some of the priorities that you're going to focus on coming up. Thank you.
So gun violence is going to continue to be a priority. 66% decline is encouraging, but we're not done. It's not going to stop there. We want to continue to really focus on gun violence as a top priority. Other priorities that I would say also intersect with gun violence, domestic violence, intimate partner violence, and sexual assaults. We have seen the interplay between gun violence and intimate partner violence, and that's an issue of particular concern. We have a pilot project now in Washington Heights and Inwood, early intervention with a service provider and early collection of evidence. That's something that we're going to continue to do and expand. And then our mental health interventions, whether that is someone with a mental health issue and access to a gun, or just more broadly, some of the disorder and concerns that we see, getting services to people to prevent crime before it happens is something we've been involved in through a number of initiatives, and we're going to continue to build on that.
Yeah, a lot of crossroads, and I'm sure substance abuse plays in there as well. But we thank you. This has been a really robust and informative conversation and right in tune with what we're doing. Harlem Network News and WBAI, we thank Isaac Ferguson for really just saying, okay, all eyes on this gun violence situation. So we've continued with the segment. We've even had the president of Howard University Hospital, because there's an aspect where they're dealing with it. Aisha say, cool, we've had her on, medical surgeons who deal, because the other thing that we didn't say is the fact that there's a lot of the automatic weapons, but in some of our places like a Harlem or a city, we're dealing with 9mm and that kind of thing. So, but anyway, thank you so much. And this has been very important. And I'm sure a lot of questions will come from this. So,
Well, thank you for all your
Right.
your advocacy and all your reporting. I think educating the community on these issues and being in dialogue with the community and leaders like you is so important. So happy to take part and look forward to talking again in the future.
Okay, absolutely. We're going to keep going. Thank
All
you.
right, onward.
Or whatever. Okay.